When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. We're going to be continuing our reread of A Game of Thrones, and we're going to be doing Catelyn VIII. This is a very good chapter. It's good to be back with Catelyn. We've had quite a bit of a break, so let's kind of do a little bit of a catch-up. The last we have actually seen of Catelyn in the book was back when Tyrion was still at the Vale. So that kind of paints the picture for how long it's been. I haven't touched this character in I think a couple months now. So yeah, interesting. We're finally back with the character, and it picks up with her reuniting with Robb, which is a great moment for this book. It really paints kind of how long a lot of these characters kind of been away from each other, and it's just a really good moment. So that'll get us into page 595. Catelyn opens the chapter by seeing a banner that she presumes is a Stark sigil. It is a white with a gray smudge that is probably the wolf. She is glad she has made it in time. Again, Catelyn is coming to Robb's camp that is right now encamped at Moat Cailin. She's coming with the Manderly, a very sizable force. As we know later on in the story, they're a really big part of the North. And so she has basically been taking up with the Manderlys to get to Robb's camp. Well, Wireless Manderly notes that they await them as his father said they would. The Blackfish then says, let's not keep them waiting, and they head towards the camp with Wireless and his brother Wendell, alongside 1,500 men-at-arms from the Manderlys, 200 of which are mounted horse. Again, a very sizable army that they are contributing to Robb's cause. Catelyn remembers her encounter with Wyon Manderly as he was too fat to sit a horse and would stay in White Harbor to ready their defense. He does tell Catelyn if he knew another war would come in his lifetime, he would have eaten less eels. Now, something I find very interesting is, in a lot of ways, Catelyn is actually doing what Roose Bolton kind of does later on in the story, or Catelyn is kind of doing what I think a lot of people do when looking at Wyon Manderly, especially like the phrase. He is someone that gets overlooked because of his weight and because of his demeanor. People overlook him all of the time. And so that's something to really keep in the back of your mind. Even Catelyn, someone that knows a lot of these Northern Lords really well, she kind of in this moment seems to be overlooking him as well. Beginning of page 596, she remembers how his fingers were fat as sausages, but that his boys will get her to Robb. Catelyn thinks she wishes the boys who were older than her did not take so much after him. Again, these guys really, you know, they're not Wyon Manderly, but they also have this look of being very big. They were both hugely fat, barely able to sit a horse. Wendell and Wireless also had opposite personalities. Something we see a lot at the times with siblings is they kind of take the opposites of each other, right? And so the two are way different in demeanor. Wendell is more loud while Wireless is more quiet. So that's something that we also see in kind of that nice dynamic there. Either way, though, she liked them enough. They had gotten her to Robb. And something else I want to note, and we think about this with Sansa, how she judges people off of their physical appearance all of the time. Catelyn does a little bit of that. She's not as bad as Sansa because Catelyn's grown up, right? She knows that it's not all about that kind of stuff, but it really shows you where Sansa kind of got that in the story. Why does she look at knights and think about, oh, they're better if they're more handsome and all those things, right? Think about how the way she looks at Beric and Loras in this book. But she is pleased to learn that Robb is taking precautions, sending eyes out to the east as well as the south. It showed he was taking this seriously and being very careful, something that Robb is going to do really well. He's really good at sending out outriders, being able to mask their movements, something that's going to be very important in this book, and how he gets a surprise attack on Jaime. And that's only going to get better when you have someone like the Blackfish, right? A very seasoned military commander. He actually kind of pretty much has a specialty in that kind of combat, and so he is a huge asset to Robb's campaign, something the show sorely missed, in my opinion. Catelyn was extremely scared for Robb in Winterfell, seeing him lead an army, but she was also proud, as a year ago he was a boy, but what was he now? Again, think about it like this, right? You leave your child, who at this point he's only 15, and he's rallied all of these men, 20,000 men, it said, or 18,000 in that ballpark. That's a really big feat, bringing all these people together and being a leader, right? At the age of 15, right? So you would have that idea where, yes, you're scared for Robb because he's still so young. He's still very unexperienced. But yet, even with all that said, he's gotten this far, which is a really big feat for him. Outriders spot the Manderly banner of the Mermen and point them to a dry camp spot. Wyllis stays here to get the camp made ready, while Wendell continues with Cat to show his respects to Robb from his father, Wymond. Again, makes sense, right? I think it's really interesting the way that they actually like organize the camp, right? Like you have to make sure that you all have these little planned out spots and all that, so it's not a mess, right? Because let's say if you're getting attacked, it's very unlikely you're going to get attacked at this far north, but this is almost practice, right? For when they go south, you want to be organized, you want to be able to respond if there is some sort of attack. And so having it nice and organized and layered is really important. Something we see kind of Jaime do in the Riverlands later on in the story. But again, thought that was a really nice little touch there that I wanted to talk about. But the ground was soft and wet beneath their horses' feet. But she noticed the camp area hard at work with wagons of food supplies like hard bread and salt beef, as well as armory work. Again, something that I think George does a really good job of in painting in this war is you need supplies for a war, right? You need food. Even though it doesn't sound like the best food, you need food to supply your men. You have a lot of men coming south. You can't really afford to stay in one place because then you'll pick the entire area clean of food. And that's something that Catelyn and Robb will talk about later on in this chapter. But I just like the attention to detail that George shows here, showing that this is a war zone, right? Like these are people preparing to go to war. But at that point, she sees the great moat Catelyn and its great walls and towers, or what remained of them anyway. And at this point, instead of me trying to paint a visual picture for you guys in my own words, I'm just going to take a direct quote from page 596 and also continuing into page 597. Just beyond, through the mist, she glimpsed the walls and towers of Moat Catelyn, or what remained of them, immense blocks of black basalt, each as large as a crofter's cottage, lay scattered and tumbled like a child's wooden blocks, half sunk in the soft, boggy soil. Nothing else remained of a curtain wall that had once stood as high as Winterfell's. The wooden keep was gone entirely, rotted away 1,000 years past, with not so much as a timber to mark where it had stood. All that was left of the great stronghold of the first men were 3 towers, 3 where there had once been 20, if the tale tellers could be believed. The gatehouse tower looked sound enough, and even boasted a few feet of standing wall to either side of it. The drunkard's tower off in the bog, where the south and west walls had once met, leaned like a man about to spew a belly full of wine into the gutter. And the tall splendor children's tower, where legend said the children of the forest had once called upon their nameless gods to send the hammer of the waters, had lost half its crown. It looked as if some great beast had taken a bite out of the crenellations along the tower top and split the rubble across the bog. All 3 towers were green with moss. A tree was growing out between the stones on the north side of the gatehouse tower, its gnarled limbs festooned with ropey white blankets of ghost skin. Again, we really get an interesting description here of Moat Catelyn. It's kind of described in 2 different manners, and one is this really big historical monument for the North. Personally, it's been here for a long time. But on the other side of that, you also look at this idea that this is still a formidable area, right? The positions that it holds are very key to the axis of the North. It's not a very nice location. The conditions of this area are not really great, and that's what Catelyn's kind of talking about. The flip side of it is what kind of she was thinking, right? Is that even though it is really formidable, it's kind of falling apart. It's so ancient that it doesn't really seem like it is as great as it once was. And that's something that the Blackfish is going to like kind of talk about here in page 597. The Blackfish speaks on Moat Catelyn, and before he can finish, Catelyn notes it is a death trap. She notes that it looks underwhelming, but Ned had told her it was formidable. And I think that's a great sentiment here just for the North, right? It looks like maybe the North is a little bit underwhelming when it comes to maybe manpower or things like that. But you look at their resolve, you look at their conditions that they have in the North, and it gives them all the advantage in a defensive war. And that's kind of what Catelyn is noting here. Like, the conditions are terrible, right? Anyone trying to assault this from the front would be pretty dumb, right? It's so easy to control this spot. And now that kind of shows, like, why would the Greyjoys target this area of all places when they attack the North? It makes complete sense because you completely trap the North from any forces coming north, right? If they're going to lose the North, it's going to be from forces within, or it's going to be from a navy coming around and landing behind them. Very similar to what the Greyjoys end up actually doing. But Catelyn notes the 3 towers covered the entire causeway, the entire going through quicksands and mud up to your waist, full of bogs, snakes, and other creatures. To take the towers would be near an impossible task. Lastly, it is said at night there are ghosts who are vengeful for southern blood. But like, think about these conditions, right? It's very slow trying to get to these towers. It's a, you know, not only are you being affected by the natural wildlife as well, these animals like snakes and things like she talks about, but also just mud up to your waist. And you got to think about it, right? Let's say you even have 1,000 archers here, right? That's not how much Robb is going to leave here, but think about if you did. How in the hell would you get up there? You're such an easy target. It's not like you're moving fast at all. And so it's amazing to kind of think about and what George created here, because realistically, the North should never, ever lose really any type of war when it comes to a defensive war. And when you look at kind of Aegon's conquest and why Torrhen ended up bending the knee, it's because of this, right? It's like with the dragons, the capabilities there, the dragons could get past Moat Cailin, right? They could destroy Moat Cailin for the most part, completely just take it out of, completely neutralize that location, and that's why the Starks bend the knee. And so when we get to a point later in the story, and in this book, specifically when Robb is named king, that's going to be an interesting like part of it, because like they bent the knee for the dragons. And now at this point, if they fight a defensive war with just the North, no one can really stop them. And this kind of chapter proves that. But the Blackfish tells her to remind him not to linger here long, as he is Southern himself. And he laughs, again noting on the ghosts. And that gets us into page 598. So in page 598, Catelyn notes the 3 towers. They have banners hung on all 3, as the Drunkard's Tower had the Karstarks, the Children's Tower the Umber Sigil, and the Gatehouse Tower rests only the Direwolf banner. Now, I find this to be interesting because given that the best positions are given to the Karstarks and the Umbers, it is quite different. Or it is quite interesting because Robb is already showing his favoritism on which houses that he believes should have those towers. Now, whether that's because they command the most manpower or he believes them to be the most loyal, it is something that I think someone like Roose Bolton would have seen as a slight, you know? And that's something that I find interesting is like, if you're Robb, how do you rationalize who gets those other towers? You're going to be offending somebody, and that's the interesting part about ruling the North. There's so many different pieces going on, something that we've really kind of figured out even more in the last book that we've gotten in Dance. But she instantly begins to head towards the Gatehouse Tower and finds Robb deep in conversation over maps and preparation for the war with Roose Bolton and the Great John. There's also others here, but those are the main people talking at this time. Greywind is the first to notice her, their eyes meeting, but then Robb notices her in a voice full of emotion as he says, "Mother." Now, this is a very emotional and important line to the story. Think about Robb's last word. Nice little moment there of George setting up something for later on that you may miss right on a first read, but when you come back to it and you see it, go, wow, that's a powerful line. And the way George describes it is Robb's voice is full of emotion. Think about everything he's dealing with right now. Robb has an immense weight and pressure on his shoulders, and seeing his mother, someone that he can just completely trust, right? Robb doesn't really have many people around him, or any that he really believes that he can completely trust. That kind of really would be maybe only Theon right here with them. And so Catelyn is just this person, again, it's also seeing your mother in a time of stress, being able to break down and confide in them. It's a powerful moment for this chapter. But Catelyn wants to run to him, hold him in her arms, and say no one would hurt him. But she could not in front of these lords for her son's sake. Again, it would make Robb look weaker, like a boy. All these things that these lords are questioning would be confirmed if Catelyn did that. And so it is that hard dynamic. Like, how do you deal with your son now who, a year ago he was still, in your eyes, probably your little boy, and now you have to treat him like a man. Greywind comes bounding towards her, sniffing her hand, as Catelyn thinks the wolf seems bigger than the average wolf ought to be. Again, just showing how they've grown so quickly. But she notes that Robb has grown a beard at 15, which is quite impressive. Again, think of yourself at 15. Like, kind of crazy that he was growing a beard at that time. I know for me personally, I didn't even really start shaving and or having facial hair issues until like 17, 18. So Big ups to Robb, I guess. But he rubbed his beard awkwardly, and Catelyn notes it is redder than his hair, but says she likes it and makes him look more like Edmure. But she also pets Greywind because he's a good boy, and he goes back to his place. But again, interesting to note here is like how much Robb doesn't look like a Stark, right? He looks a lot like Edmure. Very interesting, right? I think that's really crucial to understanding maybe Jon's parentage, to kind of the interesting dynamic between all the Starks and how they act in certain situations. I find it very interesting because George does place a lot of importance on physical features. At this, Sir Helman Tallheart was the first to kneel to her, saying she is a good sight in troubled times, and one by one they all follow, and Theon is the last, saying he thought not to see her here. But Catelyn notes she thought she wouldn't be here, but once news arrived to her at White Harbor that Robb called the banners, she knew she had to come. Again, she must have, right? Like, even if Catelyn plans on going home to Winterfell, which I think, you know, is kind of the original plan, she needs to see her son one last time at least before he goes off to war, to give him advice, see what his plans are and all of that. So again, I think it's an interesting moment that Catelyn rushing to the battle is something that all these lords kind of would be questioning, like, why is she here? But also think about the last information the North would have had on Catelyn's whereabouts, that she was in the Vale with Tyrion. Or even some of these other rumors, right? Like, Bran talks about other rumors, but this is a very weird sight to see. But that gets us into page 599. Catelyn introduces her party with Wendell and the Blackfish, who Robb thanks for coming and asks about Roderick, but Catelyn has sent him back to Winterfell as Castellan, as Luwin has no skills in the art of war. Again, I think a good decision, right? You need someone to at least be in charge just in case something ends up happening, wink wink. But yeah, I think that's a smart move by Catelyn. Is someone she can trust as well. But again, also, Robb has got to be overjoyed to see the Blackfish here. Just another really strong military commander that he can trust. The Blackfish is family to him. Just a lot of people that are coming to Robb's camp at this point that are really good for him personally. And also, think about the way Jaime views the Blackfish. I think a lot of that would have also applied to Robb as well. But at this, the great Jon pipes up saying Winterfell is safe, and they are on their way to put their sword up Tywin's ass, and then it is off to free Ned. Again, very optimistic thinking, given their numbers, their situation, really the bad situation they're in general. But, you know, having a little bit of optimism never hurt anybody. But at this, Roose pipes up, as Catelyn notes, when he speaks, other men quiet. Again, really giving that vibe that Roose is someone that is respected, but also more feared than anything, especially with his voice, his quiet but soft and powerful voice. But I love that we go from everything kind of being a happy reunion and all this, and Roose gets right down to the point, right? He almost destroys this nice reunion as he asks, what of Tyrion, who was her hostage? He could be of great use. Again, I just love that Roose is always trying to see where the political gain is, where they can get the upper hand. That's something that's also great for building that character early on. Catelyn says that she did hold Tyrion, but the gods ruled him set free along with the help of her idiot sister. Again, I do like that Catelyn, again, her emotion takes over. She probably shouldn't be saying that in public when it comes to her sister, but she has so much hatred right now for what her sister has been doing. She's not helping. She's actively hurting their position. And on their last interaction, Catelyn had actually asked Lysa if she could foster Robin, again, to separate the two, right? What Jon Arryn originally wanted to do. And Lysa threatens her by saying if she tried to steal him, she would send her through the moon door, and that ended all conversation with her. That is crazy, right? Like, and again, we talk about Lysa. She is someone overly protective of Robin. She's very scared for her and for him and all of that. But just crazy thing to say to your sister. But many wanted to ask more, but Catelyn held her hand up and asked to speak with her son alone, and so the others were forced to oblige. I will say, and I find it interesting to think about, like, if you're a Northern Lord and you just get this information that Catelyn had him set free or something like that, but also that her sister is an idiot, like, that gets the wheels turning, right? That the Starks and the Vale, the Arryns, are not on good terms. And that's a huge blow because the North was thinking, oh yeah, I mean, Lysa is Catelyn's sister, and, you know, Lysa, her family and Riverrun, the Tullys, they're getting attacked. You would think you could count on them, but that little segment there does not sound very good. And that's something I think Roose Bolton would be thinking about. The wheels would already be turning in his mind. But that gets us into page 600. So getting into page 600, she begins to eat and drink some of the leftover food and drink that's been there, and studies Robb. She notes that Edmure had grown whiskers at 16, and Robb notes he is almost 16 as well, but Catelyn says he is 15 now, and leading a host. Can you understand why she might fear? Again, there's a lot of reasons why Catelyn should be very suspect of this. Like, is Robb ready, right? He's so young, he hasn't experienced so much of the world, and here he is leading an army. Robb says there was no one else. And this is something that constantly comes up because Lewin talked about it in the last Bran chapter. Bran talked about it. Everyone seems to think that Robb could have sent someone else. And Catelyn even notes that, right? She talks about all these men in here, the great Jon, even Theon. This is something I think is funny. She says, even lastly, maybe even Theon. She's already forgetting Ned's words. Ned says to keep Theon very close to them. He could be very important. And what does she do? She suggests giving Theon the control over the army of the North. A Greyjoy. Sometimes she's not very smart, but I will say it is like her last option out of the people, but still, the fact that she even mentions him is insane to me. Again, it's a lot of Catelyn just not wanting Robb to be in a position of danger where he could possibly die. That's kind of where a lot of this rationale is going, because again, Robb notes those people are not Starks, but Catelyn says they are trained in war, and a year ago, he had been training with a wooden sword. And again, Robb is correct in my opinion, right? It has to be a Stark. It can't be somebody else. You can't ask other people to start dying for you and your family because of what's going on. Robb is angry, but asks if she's going to send him back to Winterfell. And Catelyn says she should, but she cannot do that to him. It is too late. And again, we see that Robb is still the boy, right? There is still that mixture of which Bran talks about, Robb the Lord and Robb the boy. But Catelyn notes, like, it's too late. Right? If this had been starting to happen at Winterfell and she was there instead of going on this delay with Tyrion, things could have been different. But once you've called all these people together, if they go back, it'll be detrimental to Robb as being a future lord. And Catelyn even notes that. She says that if she did this, the lords would laugh at him when he eventually became their liege lord. He will need them to respect him, even fear him a little. Again, very Tywin-esque words from Catelyn, but it shows that Catelyn's right. She understands how to rule the North. But again, Robb is way ahead of her on that one. Again, Robb has already garnered getting the respect and fear of the men. But she notes laughter is the death of fear, a very common theme in this story particularly. Robb says she has his thanks with relief, and Catelyn notes she can still remember him as a baby as she touches his face, which Robb seems uncomfortable at. Again, Robb is a 15-year-old boy hitting puberty. Like, this kind of stuff is going to be very, cringy, and he's going to cringe away from those type of things. But it's Catelyn realizing that her son is becoming a man. He asks if she heard about the news about father, and Catelyn says she does, and that the news of Robert's death and Ned's imprisonment had scared her a good deal more than she could tell Robb. Again, Catelyn has to be strong for Robb. If she starts breaking down, what's to prevent Robb from breaking down? Robb is looking towards Catelyn for that strength. Think about this and how this entire interaction has gone down. But that gets us into page 601. She notes Lord Manderly told her of the news and asks about Arya and Sansa. Robb notes that there were letters sent to them at Winterfell and finds it something in his tone made Catelyn troubled. Again, we remember that Sansa sent these letters, but they didn't really know where Catelyn was, so they just sent it to Winterfell. And so Catelyn is already picking up that this letter is not exactly good news. But also, side note, Catelyn's letter at Winterfell could be used later for future plot points. I found that very interesting, given that it is going to be a letter from Sansa saying some things that, if it's infuriating Robb, who's her brother, think about what that would do for other Northern Lords. I do think that's an interesting plot point the show tried to use, but didn't really use it that well. Catelyn reading the letter goes through her emotions, disbelief, anger, and fear. Think about everything that you would, seeing your daughter write these things that are just really outlandish in what she's writing. But she knows this is actually Cersei's letter with undertones in it like Sansa is being treated well, at least for now. They have Sansa as a hostage and mean to keep her, which is just like, yeah, no duh, Catelyn. Like, duh. But again, it is nice that she does at least recognize it. Robb, again, going back to Sansa's last chapter, remember, she didn't really think about Arya in these letters, and Robb notes that here, that there was no mention of Arya, and Catelyn agrees, trying not to think what that meant. Again, no words here is not a good sign, because if you're Cersei and the Lannisters, you want to flex your hostages. You want to say, yeah, if you do something stupid, we'll kill Arya and Sansa, right? Like, that's kind of the way you want to send it. But if you don't have Arya, you don't want to tell that to the Starks, because they're going to be going, wait, did you kill our daughter? Like, what now prevents us from stopping this war type thing, right? So again, there's a lot of heavy undertones there. Robb says he had hoped they could trade for the imp, but he crumbles up the letter, not for the first time, Catelyn notes. Again, Robb is very frustrated, going through a lot of stress, but Catelyn has made their position even worse. Not having Tyrion is detrimental, because if they had Tyrion, what they could do is try and trade Ned and Sansa for Tyrion. And again, maybe that wouldn't work originally or right off the bat, but think about the way Robb does his strategy. If Robb becomes a position of power and the Lannisters have to worry about him, that could be a really good deal, especially when you think about Robb capturing Jaime as well. That would have been a really big position, because Tywin would have been without an heir. Both of his sons would have been captured by Robb. But Robb moves on, asking if there's any word from the Eyrie. He had written to her and wants to know if she is calling the banners or helping them. He asks if the Knights of the Vale will be joining them. Again, this is kind of Robb really looking for a way out, because right now he is really on the back foot, right? He has way less men than Lannisters, way less resources. If the Vale was to help him, that could be a huge way of resolving the conflict quickly, right? Because you'd have the Vale coming in from the east. They could take on Tywin. Robb could then join them to take on Tywin, or Robb could do what he originally does and take on Jaime and basically have the Lannisters on two different fronts. So again, unfortunately for Robb, it does not go that way. Catelyn notes only one, the Blackfish, the best of them all, but Lysa will not go out past her bloody gate. Again, very detrimental to Robb's campaign. And Robb even takes it hard, and Catelyn notes that. He asks what he is to do. He brought 18,000 men here. He was once again a child looking for his mother for answers. Catelyn knew this would not do. Again, Catelyn knows that Robb needs to be strong. He needs to be decisive. He has to be a leader of these people, or they're going to desert his cause. And again, Catelyn also realizes that this is a life and death situation here, right? If they go through with this, if they start marching south, there's no going back, right? And so that's a really important part of this. Or she asks Robb, why is he afraid? He turned his head away to hide his first tear, but he notes that even if they win, the Lannisters will kill Sansa and Ned, which is a good observation, right? Like, regardless of the way this war goes, if they're captives, and let's say Robb is, he beats Tywin, he beats Jaime, he gets to King's Landing, what stops Cersei from just killing them both because they didn't bend the knee, right? Like, that's a very interesting observation from Robb, and Robb is realizing that there's not a lot of hope in this campaign. And again, it's showing some of that more emotional side that we saw with him and Bran in earlier chapters. Catelyn responds easily with that is what they want us to believe, right? Like, again, I think if you're in Cersei's position, killing Ned or Sansa is way more detrimental, right? Because of the civil war that's about to happen, and Cersei should know that, right? She should know Renly and Stannis are going to go oppose her. She is going to be wanting to look for peace, try to make the North not go to war with her, and killing Ned is the easiest way to make it to where there's no chance of peace. Robb then asks if they are lying, and Catelyn notes she does not know, but what she does know is there is no other way. Again, I do disagree with this to a degree. If Robb and Catelyn were to bend the knee, I think that would settle the conflict, but it wouldn't settle in the way the Starks would want, right? Like, Ned would still have to take the black for his crimes, and the North would be in a position of, okay, you guys bent the knee. Like, the North would lose a lot of respect for the Starks, and so in that regard, it doesn't work out well, but there is another option. It's not just not the best option. She then says if he bends the knee, he will never be allowed to leave, which I also disagree with, right? If Robb shows that he is willing to bend the knee and come to King's Landing, that is a pretty big moment. And I do think the Lannisters would actually let him rule the North. And again, I think if Cersei or Tyrion are actually in charge and not Joffrey of those decisions, I don't think Robb would be kept a prisoner. That doesn't really make a lot of sense for me. But Catelyn then notes that it is not the outcome they want. So Catelyn suggests Robb must make them fear him. And if everything goes right, if he can capture Tywin or Jaime, a peace can be reached, which is 100% true, right? Given the situation right now, Robb is in desperate need of a hostage, something to equalize this war and give stakes to both sides to where there's an ability to compromise. That is what we're looking for right now, because Robb is not king right now. Robb is just a northern lord that's rebelling. Now, Warden of the North, he's not technically the Warden of the North because Ned's still alive, but you know, that idea. And so if you're the Lannisters, you still want the Starks to be part of the kingdoms, and they haven't, you know, gotten rid of being part of the kingdoms yet. So if they were to get Jaime, you could trade Jaime for Ned and Sansa, and this conflict would hopefully be resolved. And that's if Robb can win a battle and take a hostage. So again, Catelyn is 100% correct in that part there. Robb questions, what if the war doesn't go against the Lannisters? And Catelyn took his hand, noting she will not lie to him. If he loses, they will all die. Remember Rhaegar's children. And at this, she sees Robb's strength return. Again, Robb is willing to face a hard truth. And I think that's a really important part, because that's something Tyrion talks about, is a lot of people would shy away from that. Robb is not willing to do that. And so he says that he will not lose then. Catelyn asks to know what is happening in the Riverlands. Robb says that Edmure sent Lord Piper and Vance to hold the Golden Tooth Pass, and a battle ensued in the hills below the Golden Tooth, in which Jaime came upon them. In the battle, Lord Vance was slain and Lord Piper on the retreat towards Riverrun, with Jaime on his heels. But the other news is worse. Tywin had made a second Lannister host bigger than Jaime around from the south. Again, at this point, the Riverlands are burning, right? They're being basically pincered in at this point. They're being attacked from multiple angles and sides. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the geographical surroundings to be able to defend the Riverlands. And so they are just kind of in a really bad spot. And Robb has to try and come save the day. But how is Robb going to do it, right? Does he go for Jaime? Does he go for Tywin? Both have forces that are bigger than his own host. And Robb notes that Ned must have known that, as Beric's party garrisoned with some of their own men and joined by Lord Derry were ambushed as soon as they crossed the Red Fork, and the Mountain and his men crushed them with few survivors. Again, at this point, we're basically in open civil war, right? That is breaking the king's law, but Joffrey is now the king, so he can make the laws, and the Lannisters know that, right? So again, that's going to lead to a really big plot point on Beric and all of that with the Brotherhood Without Banners and all of that, but we're not really there at this point of the story yet. That gets us to page 603. And at this point, we see that Tywin was now heading north to Harrenhal, burning as he went. Catelyn notes the news is grim and grimmer. It was worse than she thought, but she asks Robb if he means to meet him here. Again, Tywin is going to Harrenhal because he's very smart. It's a really good place to house a lot of men. It's a central point in which you can react to the war very easily. It's a really big reason why not only Tywin, but Roose takes that position. And I really think that's an interesting point that George tries to make in all of these civil wars that we see throughout the story. But Robb says if he comes this far north, but Roose and Galbert Glover think he won't come here and will take all of the Riverland castles and isolate Riverrun, which is completely correct. Tywin's not an idiot. He is not going to come to Moat Cailin. That's not a battle that he is likely going to win. So what is he going to do? He is going to break the Stark morale. If the Starks sit here at Moat Cailin, their men are eventually going to start deserting. They're going to lose food. They are in a losing position if they just sit here while Tywin burns all of the Riverlands and also has Ned. So again, the position is not great for the Starks because they're being forced into action. And Robb even notes this. They must go south, a thought that is chilling to Catelyn. She doubts what chance he has against seasoned men in Jaime and Tywin, but asks if it is wise. As it was said, they could hold numbers 10-1 here. Again, showing a lot of the naivety of Catelyn when it comes to war, because like I just said, that's not possible, right? Robb notes their food is running low and they can't eat off the land. Also, his men have been called to war. They will not sit by idly. They have been waiting for the Manderleys, but now the time is to march. Catelyn knows the difference in Robb. He is talking with his bannermen's voices and questions if he knows them as well as she did. Again, Catelyn is someone that's interacted a lot with these people, so she is a really good person to bounce off ideas with these people because she knows them and what they're motivated by. But she does know the wisdom in his words, as his army is made mainly of simple folk who came when he called, but they will not stay forever. And that gets us into page 604. Catelyn then asks where he plans to march to, and Robb is indecisive, saying the Great John suggests going straight for Tywin, but the Glovers and Karstarks think we should go around them and link up with Edmure to take on Jaime. But by the time they reach Riverrun, he is not certain if they will actually be able to win. And again, I think if you're in Robb's position, you're in a really tough spot, because for you to win, likely you're going to need to do, one thing is going to be you need to have the battle be on your terms, so you need to have the better positioning. But two, you also want to take them unawares because you have less men. And so going for a straight-on approach like going after Tywin is really stupid, and Robb kind of knows that. But how does he get to Jaime? That would take too long and also would leave him quite vulnerable, like he's going to talk about here. Catelyn tells him to be certain or to go home. Do not be mistaken, he cannot appear indecisive in front of lords like Roose Bolton. Again, very important and has heavy implications going on further into the story. Because if you're one of these bannermen or a normal guy, and your lord is very indecisive about what to do, he's putting your life in danger and he doesn't know what to do. That's the important part of it. You can't call all these people to go to war and have no plan. Robb was shocked to hear this, and Catelyn once again asks him what he plans to do. Robb says both of the plans have their issues. Swinging around Tywin leaves them vulnerable to being attacked on both sides, which is completely true, and that's why I think it's dumb. But attacking Tywin is just as risky, as he has more men, better armor, and more mounted horse. Even if they take him unawares like the Great John suspects, it would still be a hard battle, and even taking Tywin by surprise is foolish, in how Robb notes. Catelyn says good, and to continue. Robb says he will keep a small contingent of archers here to hold it, and split his army in two, his foot down the King's Road, and his mounted to the Twins to cross the Great Fork. Again, this is a very interesting plan and very risky, because you're separating your army, which is already smaller than both of the armies in Jaime and Tywin, and you're also now banking on the Freys going to your side, or at least letting you cross. That is extremely risky. And also you're risking that your entire infantry doesn't just get killed by Tywin, right? That all of your men are routed here outside of your contingent of cavalry force. So again, a very risky plan, but Robb's best option. Given this plan, Tywin will take the bait to come north to engage his main foot while he meets up with Edmure with his horse. Robb seems pleased with himself and seeks approval from Cat. Catelyn sees one glaring issue. He would put a river between his two armies. But Robb says that this is an advantage, as he will split Tywin and Jaime, as the only crossing will be the Twins, and asks that the Twins are bannermen of Hoster Tullies, right? And again, Robb is playing on the idea that, yes, they're going to do the honor system. The Tullys, because they are linked to the Freys will then instantly back them. That's not exactly the case. And also, I do think it is a good move from Robb to separate Tywin and Jaime. Don't let them assist each other. Take them one at a time on your terms. Catelyn thinks the late Lord Frey and agrees he is, but her father never trusted him, and neither should you. Robb says he won't, but asks her what she thinks of the plan. Catelyn was impressed. He looked the Tully part, but was more of his father in battle and command. She asks what army he will command, which he says the horse. Again, Cat notes the Ned side of him commanding the more dangerous of the campaigns. Again, I don't know if I would say it's the more dangerous of the two, because your foot is likely going to get butchered to some degree. And also, if the Twins don't let him, or the Freys don't let him cross, it's more just like Robb's just going to be sitting there for a while and he can't really do anything. So I don't know about that part of it, but I do agree Robb is really honing in on what was made Ned so smart and his military style. She asks who will command the other army, and Robb has his first misstep, as he says, the Great John. She doesn't want to damage his courage and pride, so she dances around the subject, saying he is fearless, but your father was not fearless. Again, the Great John is a man that is great for in a battle. but he's not the person you want at the head of an army because he's just going to run straight into the enemy. Robb thinks on that, saying that is true, and his army will be the only thing standing between Moat Catelyn and the north. And Cat harps up, saying he will need someone cold and cunning, to which Robb instantly says Roose Bolton as he scares him. And Catelyn agrees and says hopefully he scares Tywin as well. Again, Roose Bolton is a cautious man, someone that's not likely going to be caught and killed and get their whole infantry destroyed. So in that regard, I think Catelyn is right to do so. And also it's giving Roose an honor, right? You just kind of probably annoyed him by not giving him a position of honor in the towers. And so that's a nice little wink to maybe giving Roose something that he will like. Robb then says he will give the commands and find an escort to take her home. But that is when everything flips. Catelyn kind of decides she's not going to go home. Catelyn thinks about this for a second. She had been holding all of her emotions in for her sons, but now she donned all of them, as she says she is not going back to Winterfell and must see her father, who is dying, and her brother, who is surrounded by enemies. A decision, while emotionally we can understand, she makes this decision. This decision is probably the wrong one, considering she has children back home. Again, I get it. She wants to see her father one more time before he dies. She wants to, help her brother in time of need. But where she's really needed is with her two youngest sons, who have basically felt like they are abandoned, trying to rule all of the North in Robb's absence. I just, I understand why Catelyn makes this decision, but I think it's the wrong decision. Given the state of her family right now, Robb has proved himself in this chapter that he is going to be able to handle himself. And yes, having Catelyn there could be very beneficial to Robb, but I also think at the same time, I think she would be more beneficial with Bran and also Rickon. But thank you guys all for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed. I really do love Catelyn, especially at this point in the story. And I hope you guys do as well. And I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.